Hey everyone, Andy Rafael from eTeknix.com, and it is time for another build. This time though, we're going a little bit different. Instead of doing super budget or super expensive, kind of going middle of the road. We are going value for money. And we're working with Silentium PC, who we've never really done anything with on the channel. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see how things come together with that. And of course, there's going to be more RGB than you can shake a stick at. Oh yes, but before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor. I wish these files would transfer faster. Come on! Whoa, is that the Firecuda 510 NVMe drive with its blistering fast speeds of 3450 megabytes a second read, 3200 megabytes a second write, and capacities of up to 2 terabyte? I can have these files transferred in no time. And if I'm looking for the ultimate performance, I could even get the 4th generation Firecuda 520. I better check the link in the description to find out more details. Okay, so for anyone who's never seen a build of mine before, you will be extremely pleased to know that I try to keep things as simple as possible. We will be going through all of the parts, kind of bit by bit, as it happens, as we build things up. Starting with the B550 Tomahawk from MSI. This is essentially the best value for kind of money motherboard you can get on the AMD platform. You're going to get all the highlights, all the features of B550 without spending a ton of money. On top of that, the board looks absolutely amazing. I think it's going to tie in really, really well with our kind of whole system, especially the fact that we're going full on RGB. There's nothing really standouty in terms of colours. On top of that, we're going with the AMD Ryzen 5 5600X, which again, value for money wise, probably the best kind of gaming CPU you can get right now. So I know AM5 is kind of right around the corner, but that's not to say that you can't get some extremely good performance from the Ryzen 5 5600X. And the fact that we are coupling that with one of the latest graphics cards on the market means that we can enable smart access memory or resizable bar and get some extra kind of free unlocked performance, which, you know, who doesn't love something for free, right? Now, memory. Typically in the past, we've seen 16 gig of memory has been that kind of sweet spot value for money, but with prices coming down, 32 gig is now the new normal. And especially with some of the newer titles coming out, it seems like 32 gig is kind of the way to go. So we've gone with Viper Gaming, Viper Steel RGB, and 32 gig, 3600 megahertz. Got a nice little light bar along the top, but kind of stays in with our stealthy kind of theme. Now, for anyone who's never installed memory before, there is a little rhyme, and I say this every time. That's not the rhyme, by the way, that just happened to be a funny coincidence, but roses are red, violets are blue, put your memory in slots 4 and 2. So we've almost got a fully fledged kind of system here. We do need to put in our storage, and again, we're trying to think about value for money, trying to keep it fairly modest, should we say, and that's why we've gone with the Seagate Barracuda Q5. Technically, this is end of line now, but it is still available in the channel. You still can buy it, and for a very, very reasonable kind of price point. 500 gig, which is going to be more than enough for Call of Duty Warzone, and that's about it, but there's nothing stopping you adding a little bit of extra storage at a later date. So we're going to put that into the top slot, and that's where the eTeknix Handy Dandy Toolkit comes in. Available on store.eteknix.com, so we can take off the cover and install our NVMe drive. So like that, we can take our NVMe drive, put it into there, and screw it back down. And like that, here is essentially our system. So we've got our processor in here, our memory in here, and our M.2 drive. So this is the case that we're using. This is the Silentium PC Ventum VT4V Evo RGB TG. Basically, it's got all of the letters, all of the numbers. But what it actually means is it's tempered glass, as we've got here. It's got RGB, but I am actually going to change things up ever so slightly because the AIO we've got, and Silentium PC and other brands are quite guilty of this, they always end up using different fans on the case to what they have in their AIOs. So we actually reached out to them and said, look, can you send us some fans as well, just so we can make everything match up and look very, very nice. So what do you actually get for your money with this case? Well, for £80, which I've got to admit is fairly cheap in the grand scheme of things, you are getting a case with tempered glass. You're getting 3 RGB fans in the front, 1 in the rear. It's got plenty of ventilation here, removable dust filter for more ventilation at the top. Overall, a pretty decent looking kind of mid-tower case. And to go with the fans, it it has also got an RGB controller and fan controller built into the case. Okay, so with all 4 of the fans taken out, which, like I mentioned, are RGB, I'm just a little bit picky, so I've decided to remove them and replace them with these, which are the Fluctus 120 PWM ARGB. And really, the only reason I'm doing it is because they match with the AIO. Okay, so one of the big differences that you will see between the fans that come inside the case and the ones that we've decided to go for, I mean, first up straight away are the fan blades. These have got kind of ripples in them, so it's going to obviously operate a lot more differently. Also, compared to the connectors, so on this we have our conventional 5V ARGB connector and 3-pin actual power, whereas on these ones they go slightly differently. So we do have 4-pin, so it is PWM, which just allows us to have that little bit more extra control, but we can also daisy chain them as well, so we can connect them together, which if we didn't have, say, this case with the hub on there, just makes life a little bit easier, especially when it comes to cable management. Then when it comes to the RGB, exactly the same again. So we have the 3-pin addressable RGB, but we also have a male pin as well. So again, we can daisy chain. Okay, so all the fans are in. We've got the 1 in the rear and then the 3 in the front. Now, one cool thing that I've actually noticed on this case, and something that has been quite a big bugbear for me, is when you have fans like this in the front and you end up having a PSU shroud like this, trying to get the bottom fan installed generally involves you having to kind of stick your hand in here and trying to screw while there's a hard drive cage in place. Silentium have actually thought of a way around that. So while all these fans screw in from this side into the metal, the bottom one only has the 2 screws at the top on the inside, and then on the bottom you actually have a screw that goes in from this side, and it just literally bites and holds it into place. I mean, why has no one ever thought of that before? Such a genius idea. So let's get our motherboard and get it into place. Okay, so with the motherboard installed, let's talk about the power supply, because yeah, I don't think we're going to have enough room to get the AIO in and then have to worry about things. So again, with Silentium PC, this is the Supremo FM2 Gold 750 watt power supply. This is pretty good because what you get here is a gold rated power supply. You get 750 watts of power, which is going to be more than enough for the system that we're actually kind of putting together here. It is fully modular as well, and it comes with a 5-year warranty. And it's only 90 quid, which I think is pretty exceptional value for money overall. Now, in terms of the power supply, obviously we need to look at what cables we're going to need, because you do get a nice little bundle of them. There are a few that we know we're going to need, like the 24-pin. We are going to need, if we look at our motherboard up here, we can see that we have a single 8-pin connector. So we're going to need a single EPS connector. Some power supplies come with 2, some motherboards come with an 8-pin and a 4-pin, or 2 8-pins. So yeah, we are going to need that. Graphics card wise, we can see on the box 2 8-pins. So we've got a single 8-pin there, and should have another 8-pin somewhere around here. Now on top of that, we do get the choice, because of the RGB and the way that the hub works, do we need SATA? Now obviously some RGB controllers do actually require SATA. So if we actually look at what comes off of here, we have got our 4-pin PWM, but then we get this fancy pantsy little device, and it actually says it's a nano reset controller. Now if we wanted, we could just plug this into the motherboard. Any RGB controller or anything that's going through the controller will go through this, or we can plug it into this, which then comes out into SATA and also comes out into the reset switch, which just on the top of here, if we did want to control the RGB, we could do so using the case. Now another cool thing that I actually like about this power supply is something that every single power supply manufacturer in the world does, and they haven't here. Look at this. This is a PCI Express cable with 1 8-pin connector, which means it's going to allow us to make our system look a little bit cleaner, because normally you'd have a cable like this with a stupid secondary pigtail PCI Express thing coming off of it. And I don't know if it's just me, let me know in the comments section below, but it absolutely bugs and infuriates the hell out of me. So yeah, good job Silentium, you've actually done something that I think everyone should be doing right now. So as I mentioned, the main reason for putting the power supply in now is so that I can get this 8-pin connector, the EPS connector, and get it installed on there while I still have the ability to kind of get my hand in here, because the AIO, which is what we're going to be putting in the top, is going to kind of restrict a little bit of movement. And one of the other cool things, has anyone ever seen a 24-pin connector like that? It's basically got, instead of kind of braiding and sleeving it and everything, and instead of having it completely bare, it's kind of got a bit of a rubber grommet on it, which, I don't know, kind of works. I've got to admit, Silentium PC are surprising me today. Okay, so we've made, some progress. We have done all the front panel headers and everything because no one wants to see that. But if you do, we have actually got a video showing you how to do all the front panel headers. Let's talk about the AIO. I think AIOs have come a long, long way from where they used to be. And they've come down in price dramatically. And this one's no different. So again, Silentium PC. This is the Navis F240 ARGB. So it's 240mm, it's ARGB as the name suggests, and incorporates the same fans that we've already just installed into the case. So AIO wise, I'm thinking the best look for the system overall, I think is going to be this way. Obviously we do have the choice of either having the hoses sort of come down from this side or from that side, but I think with the rear fan and then potentially getting in the way, I think it's just going to look a bit too busy, and instead I think this way is going to be the better way to go. So with the AIO in place, we can actually get our dust filter back on, so everything looks seamless, and yeah, I think that's actually going to look really nice there. Was a little bit close, I'd say, for my comfort, but if it works, then it works. So because we are using AMD, this particular AIO actually uses the retention bracket that comes with it. It's pretty typical of most AIOs on the market, and it's only really if you go Intel where you're going to need something like this, which is actually the bracket for LGA 1700. So good to know that the Silentium AIO actually does have support for the latest LGA 1700. So next step is getting our thermal paste and put in a small kind of pea-sized amount in the middle. Obviously other methods are available. So the other thing you want to make sure of on the AIO is to take off this bit. The amount of times I've seen people get that wrong, shall we say. Then we can look at getting this into place onto the brackets like so, and obviously you can choose which way you have kind of the hoses or the tubes go. Then we can get our springs, get the screws, and start screwing it down into place. And then as we tighten the last one, I've got to admit, this is probably one of the easiest AIOs I've ever had to install. Just the way that it kind of grooves on the screws instead of sits on them. It's a little bit weird, a little bit unconventional, but it works. So everything plugged in for that. Let's talk about the graphics card. And obviously no gaming PC would be a true gaming PC without talking about the graphics card. And we have gone for the latest. This is the MSI RX 6750 XT, and it's the Gaming X Trio model. And if you want to check out our full review on it, you can over on eTeknix.com, or we also have a video for it. Now, in typical kind of GPU fashion, we do want to just kind of line things up, see what we're dealing with, and with the mid-tower case, generally speaking, it is the second and third slots that we want to be dealing with. Now, the weird thing is with this case, it is, let's say, on the cheaper side, and because of that, you do get the first one, which is reusable with a screw, but the second one that we need is actually kind of, let's say a disposable one. We don't need that anymore, we can get rid of it. But they do actually include in the accessory bag a few added extras. So we've actually got 4 reusable ones, which, I don't know why they weren't installed as standard, but we have them, they are available, so no real problem. So with that taken out, we can grab our GPU, line it back up into the slot, and realise that we haven't actually taken the third one out, because I mentioned second and third, and then I took out the first and second. So we actually want to put that one out, put that one back in, and get your head in the game, Andy. So with the first one now back in there, we can take the GPU and do what I was trying to do in the first place and get it locked into place. And then we can screw the graphics card into place to hold it down. Okay, so moment of truth time. Power cable in, I don't even know what colour it's going to come out at, and obviously I can't change it until we're in Windows. But moment of truth, is it going to work? If we turn it on, then it will. Is it now going to work? Of course it is. Of course it is. I never doubted it for a second. Maybe like 5 seconds. But it's actually come out of blue, and I actually really like that blue. It's kind of a bit eTeknix blue, almost. Obviously, there are a few things we do need to change. The RGB on the graphics card and on the memory. And obviously, the other thing that we need to do is, get Windows on here so we can change that RGB. But also, we need to test this with some games because we've got a 5600X, a 6750 XT. Kind of feeling 1440p fast-paced games is probably going to be best suited for this. So yeah, let's get into that. So, looking at a small sample of gaming performance with lots more on our Patreon, link down below. And starting with Apex at both 1080p and 1440p with everything maxed out, and straight away it's clear to see our system was more than able to keep up with only the frame cap of the game itself coming into play and actually restricting us. As we move to 4K, we do see that frame rate come down, but at over 100 FPS, I'm still extremely happy with it, considering we are maxed out. Moving on to Assassin's Creed Valhalla and on the very high preset. At 1080p, we're flying at over 160 frames per second. As we move to 1440p, that drops ever so slightly, but still at a very impressive 141 FPS. And then at 4K, it still holds its own at 97 frames per second, which for a game with stunning visuals on these very high settings is pretty damn good. So I mentioned fast-paced, and what could be faster and harness higher frame rates better than CSGO on high settings. And across the board at all resolutions, we're pushing over 350 FPS. Now I know the pros drop their resolution down, which will give you a, say, slight edge, but for those casual players who want to experience it in 4K, there's no restrictions with our system. Okay, so Cyberpunk, I wanted to stress the system to hell and back by running it on the Ultra preset, because this is one very, very demanding game, but looks visually beautiful. At 1080, while 30.1 FPS doesn't sound amazing, Cyberpunk is more than playable and something I did and streamed when it first launched, so don't be kind of completely put off by such a low number. While 1440p and 4K is a different story, it at least gives us scope for dialing back some settings in a trade-off for some higher numbers. Halo Infinite is next up, and again on the Ultra preset, and at 1080p, again we're pushing well over 170 frames per second. And even at 1440p, which is kind of what we were aiming for with the system, we're getting a very comfortable 135 frames per second. It's only at 4K where we see things dramatically cut down, but even then, at just short of 80 FPS, I'm not complaining. In Horizon Zero Dawn on the Ultimate Quality preset, again, some very nice numbers with no issues at 1080p and some very fluid gameplay numbers at 1440p at 126 FPS. At 4K, things started to fall short of that magical 60 FPS number that all gamers strive for, but with a tweak of the settings we could easily boost that without even noticing too much in terms of visuals. Moving on to Resident Evil Village, and at 1080p, I think it's safe to say you're going to have no issues running this game on this system, on the prioritised graphics preset. At 1440p, it's a similar story at 219 FPS, taking every frame without even breaking a sweat. And then even at 4K, at a modest 107 frames per second, it's almost like our system is only just getting warmed up. Lastly, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider on the high preset, and all three resolutions fared exceptionally well, pushing over 200 FPS at 1080p, while at 1440p it was still extremely high at 139 FPS, and a lower, yet still respectable, 74 FPS. And remember, we have lots more testing data from other games, as well as synthetic benchmarks over on our Patreon. So there we have it. I guess what we set out to do was exactly what we've just seen. 1,500-ish pounds, probably about the same in dollars, for a system that can, I guess, run 1440p, fast-paced gaming, talking kind of, maxing out Apex, Doom Eternal, any kind of big battle royale game as well. This is just gonna, breeze straight through it. I've got to admit, the fact that everything kind of went blue as a default theme, kind of dig it, and especially now that the memory and the graphics card is all kind of blue as well. I don't know, I've got something about blue, eTeknix blue and everything. It just worked out really, really well. In terms of building in this system and building inside this case, it was as easy as it could physically be. I guess the inclusion of the controller for the RGB and the fans make it, a lot easier. A couple of little gripes. I'd say the kind of quality of the material isn't, up there with some of the bigger brands out there, but generally you are going to pay a lot more for them cases from their manufacturers. Talking kind of Corsair, NZXT, when you look at it, probably about £30 to £40 more expensive than this. When it comes to some of the other components, the only other gripe that I do have is the fans that came included with the case weren't the fans that I wanted in there, hence why we swapped them out to kind of match in with the AIO. The AIO, I will admit, I think looks absolutely amazing. Maybe, just maybe, personal thing of mine, a little bit of RGB on the block wouldn't have gone amiss, but I really am sort of, clutching at straws there. In terms of all the other parts, obviously going MSI for the motherboard and the graphics card, it just allows us to kind of keep everything synchronized within MSI software when it comes to the RGB. And overall, I think we've got a really good combination, especially with the fact that you can have smart access memory, or as NVIDIA call it, resizable bar enabled, and we can get that extra performance in the games that kind of, that particular technology actually works with. Overall though, I think some of the other parts, power supply from Silentium is very, very good value for money. And the fact that these cables look a lot better than what we normally expect from, better, more known brands, I think we're onto a winner here. Let me know, is there anything that you change about this system? Fire off in the comments section below. Maybe you'd go for a different case or a different AO. Maybe you'd go NVIDIA on the graphics card. I actually think 6750 XT, if you are looking at pure rasterization, ray tracing to one side, you can't really go wrong. They are coming down in price, as we know, and yeah, maybe you can get a deal on it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be absolutely amazing. And yeah, with that, I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.